Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who could inspire the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Some believe him to be the bringer of life, knowledge, and prosperity, said to return to Earth when humanity needs him most. But who was Quetzalcoatl, and why has his legacy endured for so long? Welcome to the Mysteries of Mythology, Quetzalcoatl. There are many versions of the feathered serpent, depending on the region of Mesoamerica in which the story is told. Today, we'll look at this god's origins from the mighty Toltec civilization. From 900 to 1168 CE, the Toltec Empire was the most powerful in Mesoamerica. Centered in Tula, a city renowned for its palaces adorned in gold and jewels, the Toltecs were a highly advanced society. They credited their prosperity to Quetzalcoatl, a deity and former king whose leadership had ushered in the empire's golden age. According to legend, Quetzalcoatl was born as Ce Acotl, a demigod born to a human mother, and Mixcoatl, the cloud serpent god. Tragically, his mother died while giving birth, leaving baby Ce Acotl alone in the world. Friends of Ce Acotl's mother tried to drown him to save him from a more difficult life. Being an orphan during this time could mean a life worse than death. Orphans often lived in poverty or were forced into slavery. So when friends of Ce Acotl's mother tried to drown him in a river, it wasn't an act of cruelty, but of mercy. Miraculously, Ce Acotl floated among the river reeds instead of sinking until a passerby found him and brought him to his grandparents. They raised him to be a priest in the city of Tlaloc. As he grew, it became clear that Ce Acotl was special. He could communicate with animals and insects, a gift he often used to his advantage. His intelligence and divine gifts helped him outwit a group of malicious rulers, and he eventually won over the people who asked him to lead them as their king. This was the beginning of his rule, where he shone as a leader who valued peace and culture over war and conquest. But while Ce Acotl focused on building a prosperous and stable kingdom, trouble was brewing among the gods that would soon test him and his empire. Ce Acotl ruled the Toltecs with kindness, ushering in a golden age. Yet his half-brother, the god Tezcatlipoca, envied him. Known as the Lord of Change through conflict, Tezcatlipoca resented Ce Acotl's success and plotted his downfall from his celestial throne, believing he deserved to rule instead. One evening, Tezcatlipoca had enough of his brother's success. From the heavens, he lowered himself to earth on a rope woven from spiderwebs, taking the form of a jaguar to travel unnoticed. By dawn, he had reached Ce Acotl's kingdom and hid in the jungle. Watching from the shadows, he saw two twins playing a ball game in the village. They were the sons of the rain god, Tlaloc. Disguising himself as an elder, Tezcatlipoca praised the twins' prowess, stirring their pride. They mentioned Ce Acotl as their superior, but Tezcatlipoca, ever manipulative, persuaded them to challenge the king to prove their skill. The ancient Mesoamerican ball game, known as Ulamalisli, resembled modern basketball, but was played on a stone court with vertical hoops. More than just a sport, this game had deep religious meanings, often reflecting the cosmic battles between gods. Unaware of the divine trickery, Ce Acotl accepted the challenge from the twins. On the day of the game, Ce Acotl appeared in a grand feathered headdress. He greeted his people and asked for his challengers to step forward. The twins, instructed by Tezcatlipoca, introduced themselves as princes from another land and proposed a bet with precious stones and beautiful feathers at stake. The game began with intense energy. Ce Acotl played with exceptional skill despite his elaborate headdress, which made it hard to move his head. It was a tough match. But in the end, Ce Acotl emerged victorious. Proudly, he stood before his people, asking the brothers for the prizes they had wagered. True to Tezcatlipoca's sneaky plan, the first brother handed Ce Acotl a handful of corn kernels, claiming these were his precious stones. Infuriated by the mockery, Ce Acotl struck the brother's hand, scattering the kernels. The crowd was shocked by this scene. The second brother then presented several green leaves as the beautiful feathers promised, which Ce Acotl also rejected with scorn. The brothers collected their humble offerings and revealed their true identities as sons of Tlaloc, the rain god. They delivered a devastating message. Since the rain god's gifts are worthless to you, they will be withheld from your people forever. With that they left, and as they had warned, not a drop of rain fell on Ce Acotl's kingdom after that. Ce Acotl watched helplessly as his once lush kingdom turned dry and brown. His people's laughter turned to cries of despair, and the king realized the gravity of his error. In his pride, he had offended Tlaloc, and now his people were paying the price. Determined to make amends, Ce Acotl journeyed to the temple of the rain god to beg for forgiveness and mercy. Ce Acotl prayed earnestly for 4 days. At last, a messenger arrived with news that Tlaloc had heard his prayers and would consider ending the drought. However, the god demanded a terrifying price, the sacrifice of a virgin. Shocked, Ce Acotl refused. Human sacrifice was not yet a part of Toltec practices, and he believed it would lead to the downfall of his kingdom. Unknown to Ce Acotl, his refusal was part of Tezcatlipoca's wider scheme. The god of change knew his brother would never agree to the sacrifice, so he spread the rumor that it was Tlaloc's demand. Tezcatlipoca then manipulated followers to kidnap a rival king's daughter and sacrifice her, bringing rain to the kingdom. This betrayal shifted the people's allegiance from Ce Acotl to Tezcatlipoca. As the rains returned and prosperity bloomed again in the Toltec lands, the people's support for Ce Acotl waned. Instead, they praised Tezcatlipoca, seeing him as the new bringer of life and fortune. For the first time, Tezcatlipoca experienced the thrill of kingship and was eager to secure his position permanently. Meanwhile, Ce Acotl was overwhelmed with grief upon learning of the sacrifice. He became a shadow of his former self, consumed by fasting and prayer, hoping to atone for the spiritual peril he believed his people faced. His days were filled with torment, knowing that his refusal to comply with the supposed divine will had indirectly caused such horror. While Ce Acotl mourned, Tezcatlipoca was already plotting his next move. He knew his brother still held the title of king, and his influence persisted as long as Ce Acotl remained in Tula. Tezcatlipoca crafted a deceptive plot to oust him completely. One day, a mysterious old man bearing a mirror appeared at Ce Acotl's door. The old man urged Ce Acotl to look into the mirror. Ce Acotl looked into the mirror, hoping to see a king restored. Instead, he saw the gruesome image of a dead rabbit, a symbol of cowardice and trickery in Toltec symbolism. Determined to reclaim his honor, Ce Acotl followed the old man, unaware that it was Tezcatlipoca in disguise. At a temple, attendants dressed Ce Acotl in regal attire and a green serpent mask, preparing him for what he believed would be his redemption. When he was done, Tezcatlipoca showed Ce Acotl his reflection once again. Ce Acotl was pleased with his kingly appearance, so much so that he called for a celebration. The men offered the king the finest of foods and drink, but while Ce Acotl accepted the food, he refused the wine as this was against his vows of priesthood. Tezcatlipoca, in the guise of the old man, again tricked Ce Acotl into celebrating with what he claimed was a medicinal drink to help him reclaim his divine power. However, it was actually Mixcoatl, a strong spirit. As the alcohol took effect, Ce Acotl's judgment clouded, and he lost sight of his vows of priestly chastity. He called for members of his household to join him, including his younger half-sister Quetzalcoatl, a priestess. Tezcatlipoca used this opportunity to strike a devastating blow on his half-brother, cementing the end of his kingship. Tezcatlipoca transformed himself into a priestess and infiltrated the temple where Quetzalcoatl was absorbed in deep prayer. With a mere breath, he caused her to fall into a deep sleep. His followers then transported the unconscious Quetzalcoatl back to Ce Acotl. Upon seeing her, Ce Acotl invited his sister to drink with him, but received no response as she was still asleep. The old man lied and said she was overwhelmed by the god's presence. Ce Acotl, influenced by Mixcoatl, slept with his unconscious sister and then fell unconscious himself. When Ce Acotl and Quetzalcoatl awoke the next morning, they were horrified to realize what had transpired. News of the incident quickly spread throughout the city, inciting anger among the populace. Tezcatlipoca, observing the chaos, savored the success of his plan. The people, outraged, demanded that Ce Acotl leave the city and proposed that Tezcatlipoca take over as their leader, fulfilling the god's desire. With a heavy heart, Ce Acotl gathered his few remaining loyal followers and sadly left the city of Tula, making way for Tezcatlipoca to rule. As Ce Acotl left Tula behind, he was driven by a hope to find redemption and a way to save his people from the destruction they seemed destined to follow. His journey took him and his remaining loyal followers through diverse terrains, across fields, rivers, and into the daunting shadows of mountains. When they reached a crossroads, one path leading over the plains and the other climbing into the mountains, Ce Acotl chose the more challenging route. This decision sparked an argument among his followers, tired from their long trek. They questioned the purpose of their hardships. However, a young warrior prince named Teomitl stood up and passionately defended Ce Acotl's choice, inspiring the group with his vision of seeking wisdom and understanding through sacrifice. Motivated by Teomitl's words, the group ascended the mountain, facing numerous dangers. Rocks tumbled dangerously close, and blinding snowstorms obscured their vision. By the time they reached the peak, only Ce Acotl, Teomitl, and a handful of others survived. From the mountain's peak, they saw the city of Cholula in the valley below, a place already steeped in history and now home to other Mesoamericans, including some Toltecs. As Ce Acotl and his followers descended into the city, they found that news of the priest-king's wisdom and the tales of his journey had preceded them. The Cholulans welcomed them eagerly, seeking guidance and leadership from Ce Acotl. Initially hesitant, Ce Acotl began to share his insights, shaped by his trials. He spoke of true leadership, wisdom, kindness, and the power of creation over destruction. His teachings resonated with the people of Cholula, who embraced his vision and began to practice his teachings, leading the city to flourish, much as Tula had under his earlier reign. Ce Acotl and his loyal followers spent nearly a decade in Cholula, where he led a cautious life dedicated to meditation and prayer. He pondered ways to aid Cholula and his former subjects in Tula, still grappling with the spiritual and societal fallout from his past errors. One evening, as Ce Acotl prayed in the wilderness, he experienced a vivid dream that struck him with fear. He saw a beautiful necklace made of corn kernels spinning in the void. Suddenly, the necklace broke apart and the kernels scattered everywhere. Waking in a cold sweat, Ce Acotl was deeply moved by the imagery of corn, which had played a significant role in his past tribulations. Haunted by the dream, Ce Acotl confided in Ce Acotl, the warrior prince who had remained by his side. He expressed his fear that the vision foretold the destruction of the Toltec Empire. Ce Acotl, ever loyal, asked how they could prevent such a catastrophe. Ce Acotl admitted he did not know but was more determined than ever to find a way to save their people. In the days that followed, Ce Acotl meditated intensely on the vision, seeking guidance from the gods. Finally, he conceived of a plan he believed could preserve the Toltecs. Now numbering in the thousands, he gathered his followers and shared his interpretation of the dream. The scattered corn represented their civilization's imminent dispersal and ruin. While his followers were alarmed, Ce Acotl reassured them that he knew how to save them, but it required him to leave Cholula. Despite protests from his people, who had grown to love and respect him, Ce Acotl insisted that he must undertake this mission alone. The next day, Ce Acotl left the city to find Ce Acotl and a crowd at the gate. Ce Acotl pledged to follow him on his quest for wisdom. Inspired, Ce Acotl led them into the wilderness, seeking a salvation he believed possible. Their journey took them through dense forests and remote villages, whose inhabitants often joined their caravan. The band grew into a large procession. Finally, they arrived at the base of a great volcano by the sea. Ce Acotl felt a profound connection to this place, so he instructed his followers to build a temple using the abundant wood from the surrounding forest. While they constructed the temple, Ce Acotl spent his time in solitary prayer, beseeching the gods for clarity and support in his upcoming ordeal. As the temple neared completion, Ce Acotl prepared for the most challenging part of his journey, the sacrifice he believed necessary to save his people. He donned a robe that shimmered like the plumes of an iridescent bird, and a mask that flickered like the jeweled eyes of a serpent, embodying the divine power he hoped to invoke. Before the ceremony, Ce Acotl approached, sensing the turmoil within Ce Acotl. He threw himself at his leader's feet, begging him to reconsider. Ce Acotl, with a heavy heart, explained that he had to do this alone, assuring Ce Acotl that if the gods were merciful, he would return. With a final embrace, they parted. Ce Acotl ascended the altar and called upon the gods for strength. As he raised his hands to the sky, a lightning bolt struck the temple, igniting the wood. The blaze surrounded him, and though his followers cried out in alarm, Ce Acotl remained resolute, accepting the flames as the divine response to his sacrifice. As the fire consumed the temple, the onlookers were horrified, but a miraculous transformation occurred within the Inferno's heart. A supernatural ball of light formed at the center of the pyre. It rose from the ashes and ascended into the sky, becoming the morning star. To Ce Acotl and the others, this was a sign that Ce Acotl's spirit had reached the divine realm, confirming his promise of return. Ce Acotl awoke to find himself in Mictlan, the underworld ruled by the god and goddess who guarded the souls of the dead. Ce Acotl sought the bones of the dead to regenerate human life. As he explored the eerie landscape, a skeletal dog with backward-turned feet and hollow eye sockets appeared. Despite its unsettling appearance, the dog seemed to beckon Ce Acotl to follow. Reluctantly he did, and this spectral creature led him through the many layers of the underworld. Together, they faced harrowing challenges, crossing paths made of writhing snakes and rivers of blood, each trial seemingly insurmountable. Yet each time Ce Acotl thought the dog had abandoned him, it waited on the other side. Finally, they reached the gates of the Underworld Kingdom. Here, the dog left him to continue alone. Inside, Ce Acotl entered a dark temple filled with the eerie noise of the dead. He walked through a hall lined with torches, the ground littered with bones, the remnants of countless souls. Ce Acotl proceeded into a vast, dimly lit chamber at the heart of the Underworld kingdom. There, seated upon thrones that seemed to morph and shift subtly, were the Lord and Lady of the Dead, Ce and Mixcoatl. Despite their terrifying appearances, he adorned with a headdress of owl feathers and a necklace of human eyes, and she equally formidable. They were the keepers of the bones Ce Acotl sought. Kneeling before them, Ce Acotl revealed his purpose: to use the bones they guarded to create new life, and thus prevent the despair he foresaw consuming his people. The gods listened to his plea, but demanded proof of his devotion. They presented him with a large conch shell, instructing him to march around their thrones 4 times while playing a note on it. However, the shell had no holes. It was impossible to play. Undeterred, Ce Acotl remembered his childhood ability to communicate with animals and insects. He called upon the worms in the dirt of Mictlan to bore a hole in the conch. Even with the hole, Ce Acotl faced another obstacle. As a spirit, he had no breath to produce sound. The underworld gods watched, amused by his plight. But Ce Acotl, resilient as ever, summoned bees from the darkness, directing them into the conch shell. Their buzzing produced a sound amplified by the shell, and triumphantly he marched around the thrones. Impressed yet bound by their roles, the gods conceded that Ce Acotl had completed the task, but warned him that as soon as he took the bones, the creatures of the underworld would attack. Birds would tear at him, seeking to reclaim the bones for Mictlan. Nevertheless, Ce Acotl resolved to proceed, driven by his commitment to his people's future. As he seized a bundle of bones and fled, the gods' minions, including spiders, worms, and spectral birds, pursued him. They set traps and assaulted him, scattering the bones he carried. Despite his efforts, the bones were shattered, rendering them seemingly useless. Desperate, Ce Acotl called out to the gods above for help. His pleas were answered. The gods of the heavens, moved by his dedication and suffering, lifted him and the broken bones from the pit of Mictlan. In the heavens, they awaited him, ready to assist in fulfilling his mission. Once lifted to the heavens, Ce Acotl was surrounded by deities who admired his determination and sacrifice. They placed the shattered bones in a celestial mill, grinding them into fine powder. This dust represented the potential for new life. Guided by the gods, Ce Acotl made a final personal sacrifice. He cut his own penis, allowing his blood to mix with the bone dust.
Damn!
This act imbued the mixture with the essence of life and divine spirit. His loyal canine companion from the underworld, who had also ascended, shaped the mixture into human forms using its tongue, adding fresh maize to complete the creation. As Ce Acotl watched, the figures began to stir, infused with his sacrifice's vitality and the maze's spiritual essence. These new beings stood up, the first of a new race of humanity, destined to thrive and carry the legacy of the Toltecs forward with the blessings of the gods. During this profound moment, Ce Acotl himself transformed. His skin smoothed into scales, shimmering with iridescent colors, and his hair blossomed into vibrant plumes. He had become Quetzalcoatl, the Feathered Serpent, a godly being embodying the virtues of wisdom, creation, and renewal. Feeling a final pull towards the earthly realm, Quetzalcoatl felt himself falling from the heavens. He landed gently on a beach, his new form complete with the head and feet of an eagle and cloaked in a robe made of serpents. As he explored his surroundings, some of his old followers approached, startled by his fearsome new appearance. Recognizing their confusion and fear, Quetzalcoatl reassured them, "Do not be afraid, my friends. I was once your priest, Ce Acotl. I have returned from the land of the dead just as I promised." Hearing of this miraculous return, Ce Acotl rushed to the beach. Overjoyed, he embraced Quetzalcoatl without hesitation, Inspired by Ce Acotl's acceptance, the others soon believed as well. They gathered around Quetzalcoatl, eager to learn from him once more. After imparting all he could, he removed his serpent robe and cast it into the sea, where it transformed into a raft. As he set sail on the raft, his followers watched him drift away, his figure blending with the horizon until he vanished. This final departure was not an end, but a promise of renewal and the enduring presence of Quetzalcoatl in the spirit of those who believed. As the legend of Quetzalcoatl's divine transformation and return spread throughout Mesoamerica, it reached the ears of the people in Tula, his former kingdom. Amazed by the tales of his sacrifice and rebirth as the Feathered Serpent, they turned their allegiance away from Tezcatlipoca, embracing Quetzalcoatl as their spiritual leader and deity. This shift in devotion filled Tezcatlipoca with jealousy and rage. Unable to accept his loss of power, Tezcatlipoca decided that if he could not rule, then no one would. He cunningly rallied the enemies of the Toltecs, persuading them to unite against Tula. Tezcatlipoca formed a formidable army and launched a devastating siege on the city. The heart of the Toltec Empire was shattered, its structures destroyed, and its people scattered across the region. The historical reasons behind the decline of the Toltec civilization remain shrouded in mystery. We know that Tula fell around the mid-12th century, but the details of its downfall are lost to time. Despite the turmoil, the legacy of Quetzalcoatl and the Toltec culture profoundly influenced the people who followed, including the Aztecs. The legend of Quetzalcoatl has traveled through the long, tumultuous history of ancient Mesoamerica. The telling of his stories has changed to suit the different times and cultures where they have been told. The Maya called him the Kukulkan. The Kukulkan was a deity closely associated with the Itza state in the northern Yucatan Peninsula, and it is now famously known for the descent of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza during the equinox, where the shadow forms a long body of a snake down the stairs of the famous temple. Today, Quetzalcoatl remains a powerful emblem of transformation and hope in Mexican culture. His story resonates with themes of redemption and the possibility of renewal, even in the darkest times. Quetzalcoatl's legendary stature as a giant feathered serpent inspired the naming of a dinosaur species in the same name, the Quetzalcoatlus. You might have seen this creature featured in the film Jurassic World Dominion. In video games, Quetzalcoatl's influence stretches into popular series like Final Fantasy, where he appears as a powerful, summonable creature, known for his electrical attacks and commanding presence. Quetzalcoatl remained a significant figure even after the Spanish had conquered the New World. Friar Diego de Duran proposed that Quetzalcoatl might have been the Apostle St. Thomas. According to Duran, the saint had left the Roman Empire after the death of Christ, and his travels across the sea could explain the similarities between Aztec religion and Christianity. This connection to Europe was embraced by 17th-century Mexican nationalists, as it suggested that their cultural heritage predated Spanish influence. Quetzalcoatl symbolized renewal and creativity and a bridge between past and future civilizations in Mesoamerica. His teachings and his spirit inspired many, fostering a resilience that would shape the spiritual landscape of the region for centuries to come. It reminds us that from destruction can come creation, and from despair can rise hope. The story of Quetzalcoatl is more than a tale from history. It is a legacy that challenges us to see beyond the immediate struggles and to strive for a transcendent good. This is my first of the many stories from Mesoamerica. Learn more about the mythologies of America in the next videos.